So, based Suella Braverman has come out and destroyed the progressives. She has come out and she has said that multiculturalism has failed. Patriots are in control. A new conservative age is rising. Nothing can stop what is coming. Should we listen to what Miss Braverman had to say?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Uncontrolled immigration, inadequate integration, and a misguided dogma of multiculturalism have proven a toxic combination for Europe over the last few decades. I'm not the first to point this out. In 2010, Angela Merkel gave a speech in which she acknowledged that multiculturalism had utterly failed. And then French President Nicolas Sarkozy and British Prime Minister David Cameron echoed similar sentiments shortly thereafter. Multiculturalism makes no demands of the incomer to integrate. It has failed because it allowed people to come to our society and live parallel lives in it. They could be in the society, but not of the society. And in extreme cases, they could pursue lives aimed at undermining the stability and threatening the security of our society.
Oh, so based. Thank you, Suella. I can't wait until the party that Suella Braverman is part of gets into power and she can start enacting these policies and reversing the mess that is modern British politics. And what party is she part of again? I forget. They're not in power, right? They're in opposition.
Was it BNP?
No, I think it must have been.
Certainly was not.
Yeah.
No, in fact, it was the Tories. Do you love the fact that one of the first things that she does there is list all of these incredibly progressive politicians, Angela Merkel, David Cameron, some of her own predecessors, who've all said the same thing for 10 plus years at this point. Turns out, if you invite hordes and hordes and hordes of people in who do not share your same values and culture, and they are on no pressure to integrate whatsoever, it causes problems as people grind up against one another and don't learn to get along with one another. And yeah, that's great. And they didn't do anything about it. They've only made the problem worse. Why would I expect any different from you?
Well, as Carl quite rightly points out, if only she were in government and could do something about it.
If only she had a high-ranking position in the Home Office or something.
Yeah. So Suella Braverman is the Home Secretary. If anybody has the power to actually do something about this, it's her, on paper, at least. I worry when I see things like this, because they say that multiculturalism has failed, and they always go on about the lack of integration between communities. And my solution would be, well, in that case, we need some kind. I've seen somebody post an excellent thread about it on Twitter recently that I shared. So if you go on my Twitter account, you'll be able to find it, because I can't remember the name of the person off the top of my head, who said we can solve this problem very, very easily and very peacefully if we put some kind of memorandum on immigration and then begin to scale down the welfare state, add stipulations onto the welfare state that make it more difficult for people not of native British background to be able to claim on it, and then start to regulate in a way that's actually fair. Because a lot of these businesses that we've spoken about, Turkish barbers, the Asian nail salons, they get a lot of benefits of lack of regulation that native businesses do not. This would create an incentive for a lot of people who don't have any ties here anyway, don't integrate and basically use it as an economic zone, to leave. And then the people that do stay, because there'll be more of a pressure on it, they will integrate and possibly intermarry and other things that can slowly but effectively solve the problem. I worry that Suella Braverman is basically just going to, and the Tories, is their last-ditch effort, in the same way that, they'll probably get kicked out next year. And one of their last hurrahs was to pass the online safety bill and restrict speech even further. Thanks, Conservatives.
That will be what ends up happening with it. Will be to implement some ridiculous illiberal policy about forcing people into neighborhoods where the people who already live there have had no say on the matter, no awareness that this is what was going to happen, and basically break up communities to force people together, to force them to integrate in a way that's unnatural and probably going to lead to conflict. That's what I worry that this will lead to, because that's what the Tories do. They say, here's this problem, let's make it worse. That's what they do
best.
I'm a bit pessimistic on all of this, sorry.
As you rightly pointed out, though, and as Miss Braverman herself said, she is not the first high-profile politician to say that multiculturalism has failed. So in 2010, Angela Merkel came out and said it. 2010.
It's been 13 years.
13 years. This was 5 years before We Can Take It.
Yes.
Yeah, We Can Do It, whatever it was that she said.
David Cameron, 2011.
Just a few months after.
Yep. Nicolas Sarkozy, also in 2011. And as recently as 2019, the Dark Lord himself said that migrants should be forced to integrate. Of course, the reason given is to combat the far right and the rise of bigotry and the rest of it.
Don't want to prove them right, do we?
But he said that the failure of multiculturalism has led to a rise in bigotry. So does it not strike you as strange that all of these very high-profile, presumably quite high-powered, well-connected individuals in the highest echelons of the ruling class can come out and say that this policy has failed, by which they essentially mean uncontrolled mass immigration with no sort of presumption that the people who come here will integrate? They can come out and say that it's failed, yet it shows no signs of abating. Pretty weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
One wonders why. One wonders why they come out and say that.
Easy. The reason why they say it's because A, they know it's true, B, they know it's popular, and C, they never say they're going to do anything about it because they know they can't for many reasons, such as incompetence, such as the backlash, such as this was broken when I turned up. Why should I be the one to fix it? I can point out it's broken, but why should I take the flak to fix this system that was broken when I turned up?
Yeah.
Because they're all career politicians.
Yeah, and the interesting thing that you say about that, like you say, the career politicians, like you say, the positions that they spout are popular. That's why they say them in the first place. But it's the backlash from their peers, the sorts of people who man the front lines of The Guardian and the BBC, the people that they interact with on a day-to-day basis. They might have to get a few sneers from them if they were to do anything about it. And their precious personal reputation interpersonally with these people is far more important than their actual political goals or aims or, the things that they say that they're going to do.
I'm not sure that's the case. I really believe that the people who say these things believe it and want to change it. Just like I want to be a millionaire, but I don't know how to do it. And just because, and that's what they're doing. They see what they want and they know they should change it, but they have no idea how to change it with the tools, resources that they know they can control, because they can't control the civil service. They can't control many of these NGOs, and they know they can do nothing. So all they can do is platitudes. Hoping to get some votes, hoping to be elected again.
Why we need to clear them out.
Clear them out, yes. But we'll get on to some more of the platitudes that the Tories have given in a moment. But I did just want to I thought we would give our 2 cents on multiculturalism, as if people won't know what we think about it. I think that it's basically inverted colonialism, where, you invite in people from other lands to set up enclaves in your country, because that is, multiculturalism. Literally, the basis of it is that there won't be integration, and that there will be this kind of patchwork where there's the Pakistani bit here, and there's the Nigerian bit here, and there's the Polish bit here, and the English bit here.
Well, you are right that the term itself is quite a spectacular misnomer, because you assume that the multiculture blends together to create a larger culture that incorporates elements of all different forms of them. Perhaps in some places it could, but generally, if you want to do that, once again, you need some kind of overwhelming state power that I wouldn't be happy with to force people to do that. You would need something like the Southern American conquistadors enforcing a law of miscegenation to force people to basically create a new race that will share a monoculture that's mixed up between different cultures. That's not anything that I want to do.
No.
That's not anything I want to be forced to do either. And so what you end up with is just separate cultures that don't form anything else other than, depending on the cultures that you're forcing to live in coexistence with one another, can create massive conflict.
Yes.
If we were being inundated with Japanese people, we probably wouldn't have as much conflict because they seemed overall to be a very peaceful people. But at the same time,
the Second World War?
I was going to say, apart from that moment,
apart from that,
in the mid-20th century,
these days I'm talking about. But it would still cause problems. It would still cause this lack of cohesion that would leave people feeling as though they don't live in a society that reflects them.
Yes,
or caters to them.
That brings us quite nicely onto an excellent book written on this topic, which is Paul Gottfried's Multiculturalism and the Politics of Guilt. And I think his analysis in this book is very useful for us on this topic, because he basically talks about how a multicultural society necessitates a kind of what he calls a therapeutic state, which sort of engineers the citizens that live beneath it into being these kind of perfectly atomized consumer units instead of countrymen, basically, because the multicultural condition, i.e., people from very disparate, random places being placed in a locale and expected to live together peacefully, is a pretty ahistorical and unnatural state of affairs. So it does require this kind of top-down imposition on you to change you into the type of person that is capable of living in such a society. But another thing he highlights is that multiculturalism kind of tends towards what I'm going to call uniculturalism, which is it's not that it goes towards one. It does kind of sort of become a single culture, but it's a single culture that's defined by a lack of culture. It's the flattening down of all of these different cultures into just being basically pure consumerism, because because the people living in the area, the only things they have in common really is that they need to eat, they need to sleep, they need to breathe, right?
You can have your union flags while at the same time having your other cultural platitudes from other countries, but as long as you can all sell it as a knick-knack in a corner shop.
So it just tends towards this kind of, again, this atomized consumeristic society in which the promise of multiculturalism sort of collapses into the erasure of all culture. Anyway, on to some other platitudes that the Tories have given over the years, because this is the latest in a line of many conservative politicians coming out and making kind of right-wing statements, red meat for the voter base, and then never actually doing anything about it. So quite recently, actually on Monday it was, Connor, Dan, and I covered the sort of conservative containment, or the containment the Conservative Party represents, looking at some of the openly left-wing things that the Conservative politicians have said, like, for example, Theresa May coming out and saying, "I'm a proud woke woman," recently, which was quite shocking.
Congratulations.
But I think
no one is surprised.
Indeed. There is more to say on this issue, because I think the more interesting phenomenon is when, and the actual vector of containment is when conservative politicians come out and say things like the thing that Suella Braverman has said recently. So, for example, we had, there's this Guardian article that nicely compiles all of the occasions on which Tories have flirted with far-right rhetoric, as they put it, by which they mean just saying things that most people agree with.
Well, not being a complete leftist is what they mean when they say such things. It's bullying slurs, essentially, to throw at people to try and bully them into doing what you want.
Mm-hmm. So there was Suella Braverman again coming out and speaking about cultural Marxism. Goodness, that's spicy. The Guardian call it anti-Semitic for some weird reason. But this, again, this is good rhetoric. This is the type of things that people in our circles talk about. Cultural Marxism is not a term that's used as much these days, I would say. But in terms of
it's lost a bit of its prevalence.
Yeah, it's become quite mainstream. But it's
people just, whatever they meant by cultural Marxism, they just mean when they say woke these days.
Yes,
I would say probably.
Yeah. But again, this is good rhetoric coming from Suella Braverman. I mean, does she believe it? I think it's entirely possible that she does. Nick, you I think you were making the case that she probably does believe this stuff.
I think she does.
Yeah.
I think she knows she can't do anything about it.
Yeah. So there was this, again, pretty solid rhetoric. There was a former Tory Justice Secretary condemning, it was actually Priti Patel and Boris Johnson saying about lefty lawyers and do-gooders, preventing them from getting things done, like, for example, the boats crossing and that sort of thing. Apparently this was dangerous rhetoric and may provoke violence, according to this chap. But again, it's fairly good rhetoric coming out of the Tories, them saying about lefty lawyers and do-gooders and all the rest of it. And there was this occasion where a Conservative MP was part of a Tommy Robinson group on Facebook. My goodness, how very controversial. And there was also Nadine Dorries, who quote tweeted a Tommy Robinson tweet. So again, flirting with genuinely right-wing ideas.
I mean, wasn't Tommy Robinson, didn't he post his political compass test and prove pure centrist?
Man is literally just a centrist.
Directly in the middle.
Yeah.
Shockingly, some centrists don't like the idea of foreigners coming over and sexually abusing little girls, but...
Wild.
I mean, terrible.
And then there was Jacob Rees-Mogg promoting an AFD video. And the AFD obviously being the second incarnation of the National Socialists.
The greatest threat to democracy that Germany has seen since whatever party's in power right now.
Hence
threatened to take away their ability to run.
Hence, you have to ban them, because that's how you protect democracy, is by banning parties.
Don't forget, all this is The Guardian.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
No, it is all The Guardian.
But it was just useful because they have very kindly compiled all the occasions on which conservative politicians have settled on things that are signalling in our direction, let's say, but they're never actually done
Very
anything.
hawkish with this stuff, The Guardian is. The same with The Independent.
Yes. And then you have some other incidents, like, for example, Lee Anderson recently telling asylum seekers who don't like the conditions in which they're being held to F off back to France. Again, another bit of red meat for the voter base. You had, obviously, recently the Conservatives coming out supposedly against net zero, saying expensive insulation upgrades, we're not going to do that. No taxes on eating meat, no sorting rubbish into 7 bins, no compulsory car sharing, and no new taxes to discourage flying. We're on your side, guys. We don't believe in this globalist agenda. We're actually going to add 5 years onto the end of the goal, or however much it was. So again, signaling to the right, signaling to actually conservative people, and obviously the stop the boats rhetoric. So the point that I'm making is that the Conservatives do have a track record of saying right-wing things, saying actually conservative things. But then you look at what is happening under their rule, what has happened over the last 13 years, and it's been some of the most radical change this country has ever seen, literally over the course of thousands of years.
It's purely the rhetoric and the empty statements that platforms like The Guardian and The Independent and those like them and those who read them will always recite religiously to say that the Tories are the most fascistic far-right party this country has ever had, because they've read a Guardian article and they've gone on Twitter and they'll repost the headline of the Guardian article because they've all only read the headline of it. And then maybe they do know realistically that they're taking part in a large dialectic, and that they know that the Conservatives don't actually do anything. And it's basically just a bit of fun so that they can annoy people on Twitter.
Yeah.
Similar to, but at the same time, I don't know, maybe I'm giving the left a bit too much credit when I imply that they might be able to effectively troll people online. They've not been good at it in the past. But they don't ever seem to interrogate what they see written in The Guardian with what they see in reality.
Mm-hmm.
That, like you say, that nothing ever changes, that things continue to get worse, that the policies that people vote against stay in place or get strengthened.
Yes.
That's not their job. Their job is to support their team.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they're shouting for their team, even if they read the Guardian headline and they know it's rubbish. It's my team. I'm reposting it. I'm talking about it. I'm going to shout it. It's their team.
But 2 points there. I mean, one, it is wild to think that the people who, the average Guardian consumer, it's amazing to me that they can't recognize that the Conservative Party is their party.
Their guys. Your guy.
Yeah. Like they're doing all the things that your average Guardian reader would want. I would wager the Conservatives are doing most of it.
What has the Guardian said about XL bullies recently?
Well, indeed.
Because that whole news story felt like such a distraction, such an attempt at a big, high-profile thing to just take people's eyes off of the issues that matter.
Yeah. But as you said, there is always in waiting, a sort of mob of screeching regime foot soldiers to come and give these incidents the stamp.
Bots.
Or bots.
It might just be bots a lot of the time.
Yeah, giving these incidents the stamp of approval, saying that this is, truly bona fide Nazi rhetoric and all the rest of it. So, for example, you had this piece in The Eye saying that Fox News-style rhetoric has overtaken the Conservative Party, where they are talking about anti-net zero and stop the boats and all this sort of thing. So, according to this chap, Mr. Andrew Naughty, interesting name,
just imagining him being named in registration at the beginning of class every morning. Mr. Naughty, are you in, Mr. Naughty?
But there's articles like this. There's also this one. European conservative parties are out of ideas, but absorbing the far right isn't the answer. As if, and he does talk about the Conservative Party in this article, as if they're...
I'm being plagiarized. That image is stealing my style right now.
That is
tired, miserable, windswept.
Yeah. But there we go. Again, these in this instance, it's the Guardian giving the kind of rhetoric that the Conservatives use, the kind of stamp of approval. By which I mean they are saying that it is, far right rhetoric and all the rest of it. There is this as well. So this was in response to a Yom Kippur celebration by the Tory Twitter account. This chap says, "The irony of this gaslighting fascism."
So I'm not going to take anything from that Twitter account. Seriously. We found shoe on head's alt, guys.
So, yeah, there was this diatribe by this chap, which I'm going to read out because it's pretty wild stuff. This guy says the highly, just by the way, so this is in response to Braverman saying about how multiculturalism has failed. This chap.
I see a blue heart and an EU flag.
Well, I was going to say there's
a handle, so
yeah.
let's carry on there. Go on.
German flag, EU flag, tick. So the highly right-wing rhetoric in this statement forgets that even she can now be stripped of her citizenship if she is found to have become a disgrace by her Tory party.
I think she's married to an Englishman, isn't she?
I think so, yeah. Don't aim too high and take it too far, Braverman, because once nationalism is fully inflamed, you'll be the first target of the right. Surprised? I know what I'm talking about, coming originally from a country that caused suffering across the globe just 85 years ago. And believe me, Braverman, those who think they can save themselves by siding with the Nazi perpetrators and spill out their toxic right-wing propaganda while actually being part of the minority they were elected and paid for to protect will be the first to go to prison once 1984 is completely executed. You'll be surprised, Braverman, what your right-wing Tory lords are capable of. They are laughing at the fact someone like you is acting that way. Get out of politics, Braverman. You don't deserve to be near this high UK office you hold. You are undignified to the core. Shame, shame, shame on you.
That's a chat GPT. I feel like that if you just said, write me a rambling leftist diatribe about Suella Braverman, this is what chat GPT would spit out for me.
But the point I'm making by showing these tweets is that I think this guy genuinely believes what he's saying, right? This is not like an act. He thinks that Suella Braverman genuinely is like a Nazi, and that the Tory party are genuinely a far-right party. And it's to the regime's advantage that people like this exist, because they can then kind of push this kind of messaging, saying that the Tories are, in fact, this really far-right party, when actually, if you look at what they're doing, e.g. 1 million immigrants last year.
I think it was 1.2 gross.
Yeah. Making my point for me, it's you can tell that the Tory party are anything but. They are a far left party, if anything. This image, I'm just going to leave that on the screen, just because what is there even to say about this? I think I'm belaboring the point a little bit now that there are these people out there who genuinely believe this. Again, EU flag in the name. Not so long ago, this would have been a speech from a far right fringe party. These are the toxic values now at the heart of the Tory party and the UK government. And finally, that's my Twitter. Never mind. That must be the last one I had.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, the point that I'm making with all of this is to say that the Conservative Party have a habit of coming out and saying things and signalling to the right, signalling to actually what is probably the majority of the country with the things that they're saying, like, for example, multiculturalism has failed. Yet what they do in practice is literally the complete opposite of these things. If they believed that multiculturalism had failed, they would act on that, but they don't act on that. They act in the opposite direction, which suggests that they think multiculturalism is working. And whether that means it's working towards a genuinely multicultural society or towards something else, like, the kind of agenda that they might have, by which I mean the flattening of all cultures and turning all of the citizens of this country into kind of atomized anywhere people, perfect consumer sort of economic units, who's to say? But the point is, I think you should always look at politicians' actions and not listen to their speech, because their speech is rarely trustworthy. And that has been the case certainly since Tony Blair in this country, because he was the master of that, signaling to the right and then actually acting, in his behavior as a radical leftist.
It's been like that for thousands of years.
Well, yes.
If you read what the Romans wrote about their politicians in the Senate, nothing changes. Politicians lie, politicians untrustworthy, politicians are incompetent or corrupt or inadequate. We have the same problems all the time with our politicians.
Absolutely. So the actual function of the Conservative Party in British politics is to contain and dissolve any genuinely right-wing energy, and they are the ultimate and final barrier to any meaningful change happening. So to quote a great man, clear them out.